I'm delighted to have you as my first guest to interview around a subject that I'm just ultimately fascinated by, which is the art of decision making and how we go about that in day-to-day life, but specifically how we go about that as a leader. And I am a huge fan of yours. I have the book here. I got it when it first came out. For me, in the heart of this book, I can just see time and time again the importance of making or not good decisions. So I'd love to ask you, Bruce, as the author, what did you learn about the role of decision making to equip people to have joy at work as you undertook to write the book?
Yeah, I mean, I have to profess that I don't consider myself to be an expert on decision making, but I was chatting to my friend yesterday about cameras. Anyone who used cameras used to say the best camera is the one you've got with you, because there's no point worrying about what you'd love to have done. You making best use of the thing you've got with you when the moment happens is the critical thing. And to my mind, decision making's the same. The best decision is the one you make, because quite often to my mind, it's the hesitancy from making decisions. It's the equivocation. It's the procrastination that actually costs you the opportunity. So I don't consider myself a good decision maker in the sense that, anytime I've been forced to lay side by side what I decided and what I could have decided, I'm never especially satisfied, but I'm not remotely reflective on that. But what I do know is that I'm decisive, I make decisions and I move on with things. And so, and what I know is that making quick decisions is often the most powerful thing. I was at YouTube, I was at Twitter, quite often these vast array of things that you need to decide all the time. And just quickly having a process where two or three of you make that decision and move on, I found was energizing and liberating. I used to say to my team, the maxim I had for my team was that just make a decision and blame me. And the very fact that you've got someone to blame means you can make a decision now.
I think it's really interesting, because when I first approached you about this interview, and your response to me was, well, I wouldn't consider myself as a good decision maker. That did surprise me, because if you look at your history and what you're achieving now career-wise, and your decision to write the book, for example, your decision to leave Twitter when you did, you could see there's a whole evidence base of good decisions that you have made. Or what is it that makes you think, oh, actually, I wouldn't class myself as a good decision maker? And had you even contemplated that before I asked you?
No, I just do stuff. I'm not a good decision maker. Let me tell you, anyone who's achieved what I've achieved is fooled by randomness. I've just been lucky. I've just been throughout every opportunity. I think the challenge of modern work for most people is that there's no scope for decision making. If you look at the average person in the UK, I think around 70% of UK workers describe they do their job in teams. And the consequence of this, and it's a reflection of not just of the UK, but of global firms. People who do their job in teams, they often feel that they have no personal autonomy. They have no personal input. They feel disempowered. They're attending meetings, but they're not sure what's accomplished by the meeting, who's running the meeting, what's the objective of the meeting. And it's why so many people feel disconnected, disengaged. Most people say they have no input into how their job is done. They don't believe that management ask them how they can make things better. They don't believe that they're given any leverage to make decisions. The average worker doesn't feel like they've got any leverage, any input. And so that's the problem. So, my objective when I was saying to my team, blame me, if they could feel like they've got the opportunity to make a decision, they've got some scope to feel like they're doing their job.
Yeah.
Where most people feel like they're just in this sort of this system where they can't agree to anything. They'll go back and check with the office. They'll see if they can get something approved. And it's just an exhausting,
too many hoops.
Circular process, really.
Yeah. Have you seen a difference with leaders making decisions when they don't have access to those old clues and triggers you used to get from being together? How has leadership had to change around decision making when we don't have all that office information to work with?
So I think there's a real danger. If you look into the research says that senior leaders are the ones who believe workers need to be back in the office. No, most organizations have just had 2 years where, unless their business was exposed to footfall coming in the door, most businesses have seen 2 good years of business. And so then you're presented with this confounding challenge where you've just had 2 good years of business, but you're saying you need to be in the room together. Something doesn't add up. And it's generally the thing that those leaders are confronted by is that maybe their instincts are just habits. They're just learned behaviors. And as a result, they're willfully not reading the data that's in front of them. And, I think that's an interesting challenge of the moment we're in.
What would your advice be for leaders around making decisions in 2022, where uncertainty is still the norm?
Yeah, I mean, look, probably to slightly counter what I said earlier, but I don't believe this is the time to make decisions when it comes to working, because none of us have got full information. Yeah. Look, my strong feeling is that it's worth doing experiments, it's worth measuring them, but the organizations I've been most inspired by are the ones who've said, we don't have a top-down solution. So to counter, one of the best organizations I've worked with has said there were 60 different proposals by different teams about how they wanted to work. Some were fully remote, some were fully back in the office, and they said yes to all of them. And what they said to all of them was, please demonstrate to us how you're going to measure whether this works, and then get on with it. Now, that's an interesting contrast to what we've seen as the missteps from some of the big firms who've earned a position in our esteem as us thinking that they know the future. Apple, Google, both of them have made really big mistakes where they've said to workers, you need to be back these days of the week in the office. And both of them were confronted with workplace uprising where workers said, we don't want to do that. We were already working more flexibly than that. I think, that's the challenge of modern work for a lot of people, that if they're trusted and they're able to make decisions, they feel capable of doing really good work. If they're not trusted and they're not able to make decisions, they gradually become a bit disengaged and think, I can't be bothered with this.
Oh, undoubtedly. What advice do you have for helping leaders to get that trust? Because that's a lot of times I work with my clients on is having the trust in themselves, first and foremost as a leader, to then get the trust from other people and to amplify that. What would you say, Bruce, to be able to lead well and have trust? What would your top tips be?
Yeah, smaller teams, the best thing for it. Generally what happens is when people are working in small teams, you can reduce the amount of electronic communication you need. You can reduce the amount of meetings you need. As a consequence of that, people just feel more empowered to get their job done and to work quickly. If you've got an organization with 100 people in it, then the amount of communication codependencies is huge, and people as a consequence can spend most of their time communicating. If you've got 6 people in the team, you can often get people empowered to just work quickly and to do things. I was really struck. I do a podcast about workplace culture, and one of the best things I read last year was a book about the early days of Amazon. And I read so many of these books. Most of them have got nothing that I want to scribble down. But one of the things that these 2 early workers at Amazon wrote down is they said Jeff Bezos believed that internal communication was the enemy of good work. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. That goes against what we normally hear, because most organizations will tell promotion candidates, how's your internal communication? They'll say, are you getting to know people in other departments? Are you spending time? All of these things are a gravitational pull that stop us doing our job, but they're sort of like lubricating office politics. And Jeff Bezos believed that communication between the teams should be eliminated as much as possible.
Really?
Great to bump into someone, great to chat to them, but just do your job. And he believed that teams should communicate via API, not via meetings and emails. Now, whether they're able to do that fully or how that works, but for me, that's one of the freshest ideas I've heard. And so, and I think it's really strongly true. If workers can get away from spending all of their hours in meetings, all of their hours on long emails, sort of trying to keep abreast of Slack threads. If they can do all of that, then it sort of enhances them actually focused on the job they're paid to do, really.
Which would be nice, wouldn't it? You'd think it'd be obvious that would be happening all the time. But I equally, the thing that fascinates me in my work is I'll often say to clients, do you actually have a job spec? Are you clear on your job? And you're the CEO of the business, or you're the, whatever big cheese of the business. And they'll look at me and they'll reflect and they'll go, no, actually, I don't have a job spec. And I'm not talking some boring HR, chuck it in a Word, file it away, but a motivating, really clear and action decision-taking document, which is, right, this is where your boundaries are and this is where they're not. Yeah. So I just think that's fascinating that so many people, I believe, make poor decisions because not only are the people not clear on what their job should be because they're stuck in loads of meetings, the actual senior people don't get asked the most simplest questions, which I find is, firstly, how are you feeling? Because to me, feeling massively influences good or bad decision making.
Yeah. And look, I'm within reason, I'm in favor of that, but it's a bit like business plans that, business plans are one of the biggest waste of times for business, spending hours just putting things into a document that you never look at.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I strongly believe that having a clear job description where there's 2 or 3 clear metrics that you're being measured on, that's like fundamental. I've never had greater importance. But if it's going to be a sort of a almost pedantic line by line, I think I'm in agreement with you. Having a clear measurable about what you're employed to do, if you weren't employed, what would stop happening? That's like a fundamental thing. I agree strongly on that.
Yeah, because you can't make good decisions if you don't know the parameters about what you're making good decisions. And fascinating for me as well is that other people all have a different view on what your job should be as a leader when it's not defined. And I don't mean kind of restrictive. I'm totally with you, Bruce. You shouldn't have something for the sake of, because especially if anything's taught us in the last 2 years, it's that you just don't know what's around the corner.
Actually, having a discussion of scarcity is a really helpful thing. One of the challenges we had in one of the big tech organizations that I worked in was that quite often people would add new stuff that you had to do. I'll give you one example. It was decided that everyone in the company was going to get a 360-degree appraisal. So you'll be familiar with one of these where everyone in the company is going to get feedback. From
huge task.
8 people, like two or 3 peers, maybe 5 peers, 2 people above them, 2 people below them, whatever. It was decided in Q4 one year, everyone in the company would get it. And so what happened was it became a game because everyone knew, I don't have enough time to fill this in. You normally sort of say when you've got 15 people requesting, you say, look, I can't do any more. But what happens is when you're asked to give feedback is that people make a value judgment. They're like, that person is a bit of a dickhead. But if I tell them they're a dickhead, then I'm going to have a meeting with them telling them why I think they're a dickhead. I'm probably going to have a meeting with their manager explaining why I think they're a dickhead. And then probably I'll end up apologizing for calling them a dickhead. So what happens as a result is people think, I'm just going to say they're quite good.
Yeah, just opt out.
And so what happened was across an organization of several thousand people, everyone in the company received feedback that put them in above average for performance and above average for effort. It screwed the whole organization because what happened as a result is anyone who was being performance managed, maybe there were 1% of the company who weren't doing a very good job. All of a sudden, the company's evidence for that was disintegrated. Someone who had a terrible track record, was alienating colleagues, all of a sudden could say, well, hang on.
Everyone thinks I'm great.
I'm in the top right. When's my pay rise? And so it ruined it. But in addition to that, no one told you what you should be doing instead of it. And so as a consequence of that, 20 hours work was created for everyone that had 0 benefit. Now, if the company had to work with principle of scarcity and say, we want you to do this instead of this, we're going to cancel all meetings this week. Okay, immediately you might go, okay, cancel all meetings. Right, I've suddenly got this dividend of 15 hours back. Okay, I'm going to do a good job of this.
Yeah.
And so, having a job description where you sit down with your manager and you if they give you something new, you agree what you stop doing is probably a helpful discipline.
Yeah. I have a piece where I say, look, you only have 100%. Let's face it, we're all finite beings.
Yeah.
We have finite times. So if you divide your job spec up around a weighting of, say, 3 to 5 buckets, and you allocate percentages against that, if someone asks you to do something else, you say, that's great, but where do I take it away from?
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'll just fall over. What would you just give people watching or reading our conversation, kind of some just lovely, fresh thinking around, if you're going to be responsible for big decisions like you just talked about, where it's going to have a fundamental impact on a culture, on an organization, so that we're making good decisions for the right reasons, no matter how high the stakes, what would be your top, say, 1 to 3 tips for that?
As I said before, with this sort of caveat of the moment we're in, when you've got enough information to make a decision, making a decision strikes me as really helpful. I've been in meetings, teams, where we talked about something for an hour, then we think we made a decision. Next week, we're talking about it again. We've made a decision, and we move on. Next week, we're talking about it again. It's like, I thought we'd made a decision on this. So like, that was my instinct. Fewer people, make a decision quickly, tell us how we got on. It just gives you a bit more agility. And in my experience, making a decision is better than procrastinating. So I'm just in favor of smaller teams being empowered to do things more quickly, really.
Fabulous. I'll just add one bit of advice I got years and years ago. It's changed my life, actually, when I was struggling with a really difficult decision to make. And this person said to me, well, you obviously aren't ready to make it, so make the decision not to make a decision. It was so liberating. I was like, God, that's in itself a decision. So I'd add that to your great tips of, less people, be decisive, move quickly, be agile, empower people is what I'm hearing from you. Don't be scared to take the blame, because then that'll empower people to actually get on and take risks. And then I would just add my little bit there around, and if you're not ready, admit it and just say, we're not going to make a decision on this until we're ready, and therefore, what do we need?
Exactly that.
Oh, Bruce, as ever, utter pleasure. Thank you so much.
Talk to yourself.